And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. It's Friday. I hope you had a wonderful week. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group, sitting in it's a beautiful day here in Colorado. I'm going to look at the blue sky and not the clouds. Been a great week here. Been a fantastic time. And if you're tuning in, it's my great pleasure to have Bill Marler. If you work in the food industry, Bill Marler with Marler Clark Law Firm in the Washington, Seattle area is very well known. And Bill's one of those leading guys out there pushing food safety and making everybody accountable for what they're doing, which is what we need in those spaces. And so how are you doing this morning, Bill?
I'm good. I think we're having Colorado weather here. It's going to be, we might have snow this weekend. So.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, yeah. Wow.
So
yeah, that's always so here it's kind of you got to watch out for the California drivers that have moved out here, but that's probably like crisis level activity in the Seattle area.
Yeah. And then we're actually supposed to get into the teens and maybe even single digits, which is really unusual for us. So.
Oh wow.
So, yeah.
Craziness. So if you're new to the food safety chat, what is really cool about this is we bring an expert like Bill on every week at this time. So 10 a.m. East Coast. And again, apologies, Bill. Bill's on the West Coast. So it's a bright and early 7 a.m. start for him on Friday. And we talk about a food safety topic. And today's going to be a really interesting one that I'm looking forward to. One of the things that we love to do here in the comments is put in where you're at. And Stephanie, great to see you. So Stephanie's in a beautiful area of Germany. We're always happy to have you on, Stephanie. Ryan, good morning from Wisconsin. Nice to see you. And I mentioned I'm in Loveland, Colorado, which is a little north of the Denver metro area by Fort Collins. And Bill is in the Seattle area. And you have an office in the city and then also one on the island, correct?
Yep, that's where I am today. I'm on the Bainbridge Island office. So yeah, that's where I'm at this morning. It's about 2 minutes from my house. So
nice.
Pretty convenient. So
very cool. So this is not a presentation. And what's fun about this, and you'll be amazed if you're new to this, how quickly the time flies. We talk about a particular topic, and this is your opportunity to ask Bill questions and to get feedback on what you're doing, right? Because with food safety, this is not a point of competition. And as our information grows collectively as a group, food safety improves for everyone, which is our goal. So Jill is here. Good morning to see you in snowy Minnesota. It's that time of year. So let's, I always want to do this, Bill. So one of the things that we love to do here on the chat is start off with a ceremonial drink together, everyone. So join us. Yep. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers to my Starbucks coffee.
I got some water this morning, just a little water for me. So I think I've had my share of coffee already. But so one of the things, and when I started here too, I wanted to thank you, Bill, because there's one email I read every single day, and it's the food safety news and the blog that's put together on that. That's an amazing resource. And I will take stories from there and post them in my locals group so we can kind of disseminate this information. So I wanted to thank you for doing that and taking the time to spread that information. Very helpful.
Happy to.
And so one of the things that I've been following in those emails is Daily Harvest and this really weird situation. And as Bill and I were preparing for this chat here today, it kind of reminds me like a detective story, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely does.
And so, I mean, as we kind of get into this, as we were narrowing in and figuring out, okay, so Daily Harvest, there was these crumbles, and I guess what people would put them on salads and things like this and use them in recipes. And what were people using these things for?
Yeah. So, Daily Harvest is, one of the, many, and maybe one of the more successful of the home delivery, businesses that really, exploded, during COVID. I mean, my 20-somethings daughters, we're getting Daily Harvest smoothies delivered. And in fact, when one came home, during COVID from college, she switched the delivery to our house. And so, they would show up there were some in our freezer out in the garage that are now gone. But what happened was in May and June of 2022, they put a new product into the market, and it was this French leek and lentil crumbles, and it's a vegan food, that I think people cooked and sprinkled over rice or added it. It was just has a bunch of different vegetable ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And what was happening is when that product went on the market, there was a spike in acute liver failure cases across the country. But since acute liver failure is not a reportable situation like E. coli 157 or Listeria or Salmonella, it pretty much, was ignored by public health. You had people all over the country, probably 26, 27, 28 states that, had acute liver failure. It's sort of, in hindsight, it looks a lot like a bunch of people who have hepatitis A. I mean, they come in jaundice, liver functions are elevated, or liver enzymes are elevated. Their LFT, ALT are elevated. There were people who had liver biopsies. There were people who had their gallbladders removed. People were hospitalized for an extended period of time. Primarily because doctors thought, they had liver cancer. They're alcoholics. They had, hepatitis A, B, C, D, E. They didn't know, and all the tests they ran came up like, I don't know what the problem is. And so you can imagine, all these people, pretty freaked out about what it was that was causing their problem. And apparently in about, we don't know the details of this yet, it's still to be determined during the litigation, but it appears that sometime in, early to mid June, Daily Harvest was getting at least enough complaints, or at least people questioning, that they put out an email to all of their customers who had bought this product saying, hey, we're getting some complaints of mild gastro discomfort. Make sure you cook this properly. And that just set everybody off. So that all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, now I know it's causing my liver failure.
Uh-huh.
And then I started getting phone calls mid-June, people, and my first reaction was, because there's no public health investigation, my first reaction was, well, how are you linking this together? Because I obviously hadn't seen that email yet. And they said, well, you got to go look at Reddit. And so I'm like, Reddit, what? I over there was all these people with essentially identical symptoms, complaining, the exact relative same symptoms, and same age group, and all of them getting sick in May and June. And so, by then I had contacted by 50 some odd clients, and at that stage, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. We didn't know in June what the causative agent is that's causing people to get sick.
Uh-huh.
But I filed a lawsuit against Daily Harvest, and then we're trying to figure out what the ingredient is that's causing people to get sick. And there's starting to do testing. We're starting to do testing. I'm having all of my clients contact the FDA to try to jumpstart the FDA to do something, because they weren't doing anything. No public health agency was. Mm-hmm. And then over the weekend of the 4th of July weekend, I got a call from a woman in New York who was telling me about her symptoms. And I was like, oh, another Daily Harvest. She goes, no, I ate a smoothie from Revive. And I'm like, huh? What's the, and I get a lot of phone calls, by the way, Bryan, I have a lot of vetting. I got an epidemiologist on staff, a nurse, a doctor. We do a really thorough job of vetting. So I thought, maybe another case, or maybe just some coincidence. But what was interesting is in that smoothie product was an ingredient called Terra, and Terra is also an ingredient in the crumbles. And there also was another Reddit thread about people eating revived smoothies. So as we are today, I represent 30 people who had acute liver failure because they ate revived pineapple and mango smoothies, and 350 people who ate Daily Harvest crumbles. And so the common ingredient is a product called Terra that was imported from Peru, that was manufactured by a company in Peru. And so all of this has been coming together. The FDA kind of poked around for a while and then shut their investigation. But, I'm continuing to forge ahead, and I'm confident so far of what we found. So a long story, but I thought I'd sort of lay it out, kind of what we know right now. And one more thing, we don't know what in the Terra is causing people to get sick. And we're testing Terra, we're testing the product, we're testing, the genetics of it, we're testing it, frozen, we're testing it cooked. We're trying to figure out what the common ingredient would be that would cause all of these people to have essentially identical symptoms, different potential outcomes depending upon the person. But essentially, every single one of these people kind of look a lot alike. They're between 25 and 50, primarily women, all eating, these two products.
Wow. So everybody's okay? Is everybody recovering?
No. There's, people who have lost their gallbladders. So that's a long, that's a lifelong, complication. It's not like losing a liver, but it's, it dramatically changes your ability to eat certain foods. And, there are people who are still having elevated liver enzymes, now 6 months out. So yeah, things aren't quite, back to normal. Some people have gotten back to normal. Their liver enzymes are back to normal, but there's a lot of people who are still suffering. There are people who are undergoing cancer treatment that had to stop. And so the complications of that. So, there's people who don't have insurance. There's people who have high deductibles. So it's, it is a disaster not of their own making. So,
wow, that's crazy. So Anastasia had a good question for you. Is this stuff still coming in the country?
So far, it is. It's what's interesting. I've retained an expert on FDA rules about what's grass and what's not. It's this Terra gum, which is used as a binding agent in a lot of different products. Ice cream has been around for a long, long time, but apparently this Terra powder / Terra protein is a relatively new product, and apparently is not considered generally regarded as safe by the FDA, and there's been no determination. So it's just frankly being used by Daily Harvest and and the company that manufactured it for them. Daily Harvest doesn't manufacture their products; it's done by another company. But it was Daily Harvest's recipe, and they were suggested to use this product because it's high in protein content, and obviously in a vegan meal, that's high protein content something is a pretty popular thing. So there's a lot of questions that are going to get answered eventually in the litigation. And it's really disappointing that, for me, it's really disappointing to see that the CDC, FDA, and public health have just simply stopped doing anything on this.
that's disappointing. That's what they're there for, right?
Yeah,
So,
or they just figure out that Bill will do it. So
oh man. So this Terra stuff, this gum, and they can make it into these powders, and it's this weird plant from Peru that they use in different applications. So have you found anything yet? I mean, so there's a lot of information on your blog on this, on the supply chain. So definitely everybody, please go out there and check this out and read through this, because it's very interesting. This is like a detective story.
Right.
And so people have been eating this for a long time. So there's probably something different that happened in this manufacturing or something. Have you found anything yet on that side?
No, not yet. I mean, we have, we have both the Revive in their own lawsuit, and we have their importer. It's a Canadian company, and then we have Daily Harvest, their manufacturer, and the importer in that litigation. We have learned, which I think is key, we have learned that Revive and Daily Harvest got Terra from the same manufacturer in Peru. So, frankly, FDA and public health didn't know that until I told them.
So you found it.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of sounds like there were the two key points in here, right? Is so when you were able to link up between Daily Harvest and Revive and look at the ingredient statements and say, what's this Terra stuff? And then tracking this back and saying, oh, well, look at this. It came from the same manufacturing location. Yeah. Key points in the investigation.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, I've done, and it's not the first time, but unfortunately, I've done the job that FDA should have done.
Yeah.
So, it's really disappointing, especially given the fact that, if you go to the FDA website, they said they've closed it, but there were over 400 reported cases to the FDA.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. So
yeah, that's very disappointing. So then, I mean, the way the food safety system is supposed to work, right, is so Daily Harvest prepares these recipes, as formulas, work with the co-pack or whatever it is they're doing behind the scenes to manufacture this. There should be a food safety plan. Yep. There should be a preventive control qualified individual who's looking at this for physical, chemical, and microbiological information. Did they do any of that?
Oh, I am pretty sure that they have all those bells and whistles. I think there probably is some assumptions that Daily Harvest and probably the co-packer manufacturer made about Terra. And, the fact that the lab I'm using, the Daily Harvest, is using a different lab. And to the extent we can peek behind the curtain, I do know that FDA, I got contacted by FDA investigators saying, hey, could you stop picking up so much of this product from your clients? We'd like to test some too. So I'm assuming that at some point, maybe they've done some testing. We don't know what the results are. But my assumption is that had any of those entities said, oh, here's what it is, we would know. So I think it's going to wind up being something that's completely at the end, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it, because I think these people deserve to know what it was that's causing their illness and to understand whether or not there's long-term, liver implications for it. I mean, we just don't know that, and certainly don't want to scare people, but, seriously, if you had to have your gallbladder removed, you'd like to know whether or not, you're going to have long-term complications regardless of, that. And so, I think it's going to wind up being, some processing error at the manufacturing facility or some kind of contamination event, and maybe overlaid with, some, genetic component, and so, we just don't know that yet. NIH, I know, is doing studies. A lot of my clients I've encouraged them to do so, is to, sign up for that liver studies. And so they're doing blood tests, and they're they are looking to see if there's potentially some genetic component to, people's reactions. So, I mean, there's a lot to uncover. And, fortunately, I've got the financial bandwidth to do this, because it's not, essentially, I don't mean to overstate it, but essentially I'm doing the job that the CDC and FDA and public health should be doing and are
Right.
not. So,
And thank you for that.
well,
Gee.
it's, obviously my interest is in taking care of, essentially 400 people, and I
Yeah.
have a moral obligation to do that and a legal, ethical obligation to do it. But, it is, because this is not like kind of like an in the wheelhouse CDC FDA thing, it's not like a listeria outbreak or a salmonella outbreak or a E. coli outbreak that, gets the public health wheels in motion in
Right.
a normal way. I think, I think everybody was like asleep at the switch, but I
Yeah.
think those sort of things where, and hey, maybe they're doing something behind the scenes and just not telling the public. But and I FOIA'd the CDC and FDA to find that out, but haven't gotten a response from them yet.
I think that's a good observation, Bill, right? Because, they have playbooks. It's like, oh, there's an E. coli outbreak. All right, step 1, step 2, step 3, here's what we do. And if it's this, right? So part of this, and this is something, I'd be curious to get your take on this. This is something I always taught, people on my teams, is these are government entities, right? These are not scientific organizations. These are political entities. And there's other things that can interfere with their investigation. So you need to be aware of those things.
Yeah.
The questions are flying fast and furious. Thank you, guys. So definitely keep these coming. Let's see if we can tackle some of these here, Bill.
Sure.
So Austin asked, have the CDC and FDA justified halting their investigations, or has it just been silence?
So far, it's just been silent. In fact, if you go to the FDA website, and it simply just says they closed their investigation.
Wow.
And so, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that, FDA has great labs and great people. I mean, they really do. And maybe some of the, maybe there's some investigation going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. But, there's a lot of people out there who have suffered and are suffering, that I think, if the government's doing something, I think they probably should tell us. I mean, on the other hand, if they haven't done something, and that's a great question, if they've stopped, it would be nice to know why. But, frankly, I don't have the time necessarily to try to unravel that. I've got to move forward to try to figure out what I can. And
and to your point earlier, right, your focus has to be on your clients, and figuring out what's best for them first, and then answering these questions later. I visited the websites for these two companies, and there isn't a word about this on either site. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
No. In fact, to Daily Harvest's credit, I always think it's probably odd when a guy who's suing them says something nice about them. But to Daily Harvest credit, it too was scratching its head when consumers were calling with complaints. With these consistent illnesses, but unknown cause, and something that's not like an E. coli or salmonella or listeria. You don't know what you're dealing with, or you're maybe one of the things that is a truism is that industry gets a lot of people complaining that they think that their product caused somebody to get sick, not because people are trying to scam them, but people who get sick don't understand the science behind foodborne illness. It's not the last thing you ate, or it's not the thing that you think it was. It could be something else. And so,
Exactly.
industry gets bombarded by a lot of, noise. And so, to Daily Harvest's credit, they did put out a statement which, kind of coalesced the whole problem. And I think then they also put out a statement saying their investigation links it to the consumption of Terra, not knowing exactly what it is. And I do know that they are doing their own independent investigation about what it is in the Terra that's made, and doing essentially what I think the FDA should be doing, and similar to what I'm doing. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're probably as frustrated with the FDA as I am.
Yeah. Well, and this is something I always, from a food safety standpoint, working on the industry side of things, I was always very cautious about. And we're seeing more and more of this, right? And if you're in a space that's hyper competitive, the e-commerce market and things like this, you're looking for the next new superfood, right? That you can throw in your product, right? And the marketing guys read an article and like, ooh, this is kind of cool. Let's throw this in our product. And as a food safety guy, you're like, now, what's this stuff, right? And you're trying to figure out, and the marketing guys are going, hey, we need to launch this in a month. Yeah. And you're trying to scramble to keep up on top of this stuff.
It's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. But to Daily Harvest, they pulled the product, or they at least, told people to stop eating it and stop making it. Revive quietly stopped making. And if you go onto their website, you can't buy a pineapple mango smoothie anymore, but there was no recall. And, the FDA appeared, because it was a Canadian company, but the FDA appears to have done absolutely nothing to look into this. So.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I mean, and the other side, and this is one that kind of stuck in my craw earlier from the years, is when CEOs take the opposite approach and deny, right? Yeah. So with like Big Olaf ice cream down in Florida, right? That one, oh my gosh, yeah, that's horrible, right? Textbook example of how not to handle a recall. That one just really irritated the snot out of me.
Well, they no longer exist. So
good. Yeah, good. They shouldn't. Corey, who follows this industry really closely, had a comment here. The CEO, Rachel Dory, I'm sure I'm saying that correctly, said herself, the experts said, don't do this, and she ignored them. They likely didn't do a risk assessment because they couldn't do business. All right, so Corey's just kind of, so it's kind of a commentary.
Yeah, and that, to be honest with you, the great thing about a lawsuit, it's a lot like sunshine. All the information that we're going to be gathering will eventually get public. And so, all of those questions about who knew what and where and things like that, those things will get shaken out, and hopefully you will get some answers, and hopefully, what we learn, other companies can add to their repertoire of things, to or not to do.
Exactly. Well, and we were chatting a little bit before we started here and went live. That's what I want to see, right? So as a food safety professional, I want to learn from these instances so I don't repeat the same mistake that another company made. That's the only way we get better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. Let's see. So Austin had a comment here. Perhaps this is why many people are saying that the food aspect should be removed from the FDA, right? Oh, yeah, that's a whole other show coming up there.
I testified in front of that Reagan-Udall committee, and I would urge all of your listeners and watchers to read the Reagan-Udall report that went to Calif. It is a good read. I think it's accurate, and it'll be interesting to see if the FDA takes what these panels of people recommended. It'll be interesting.
Yep, no, totally agree. So Rick had a good follow-up question on the Canadian CFIA. Did they launch an investigation?
Not that I'm aware of. So we're asked. We have. It's a little different doing a Freedom of Information Act request to CFIA, but one of the things that I did, and it's not uncommon for us to make sure that people report their situation to the proper authorities. Because I think that, but most of the time, in the cases that I've done over the last 30 years, the system operates kind of independently of the victim calling the health department.
Mhm.
So it has a positive stool culture. By law now, it's reportable, but there's not a reportable registry for acute liver failure. Maybe there should be.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and so you mentioned Reddit earlier, and how people were kind of chatting about that, and other sites, Bill, popped up too. IwasPoisoned.com and these type of
Exactly.
things where people were reporting. What are you seeing on your side as a food safety lawyer relative to those sources of information?
Um, I'm always a bit suspect of that simply because I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, and this was probably, it may be 15, maybe 20 years ago, somebody sent me a link to a conference that was being held. It was all these lawyers were having this conference about food safety and food litigation, and they're like, "How come you're not on this?" And I was looking at it. It was like, well, it was all the defense lawyers, and it was being put on by the Grocery Manufacturers Association.
Okay.
So just to be funny, I logged on and put in my name and credit card and said that I was going to come. And I get a phone call a couple of days later. They said, well, we'd really like you not to come, but we can't discriminate against you because if we do, then all the lawyers will not get their continuing legal education credits. And I'm like, but so we'd like you to be our keynote speaker. So I went there and it was actually really, to me, it kind of dovetails back to what we talked earlier. To me, what was really interesting is that the entire conference was focused on essentially cases that I would never take.
Mm.
They were focused on, like, somebody, putting a rat in a can of beans after, the can was opened, or, the finger in the chili case, or, people, all the fraud claims, all of the, grandma not understanding that the incubation period for listeria is 3 to 70 days. And, she got sick an hour later and she's convinced that it was the cheese and all of that. And I was thinking to myself, it's like, oh my God, these companies, like, if they think everything is like BS, how are they going to filter out, like, when they really have a problem? And I learned a lot from that, going to that. And I appreciate them letting me come and watch a little bit because, it gave me a better understanding of, the struggles that food safety and companies have in sort of paying attention to things that really could be a problem for them. Because if they
Yeah.
think everybody's out to get them, everybody's out to scam them, how do you keep, your head focused on that food safety culture to make sure that a real thing doesn't happen? And so I think that's a real interesting, it's something when I talk to industry people, it's something I recognize as something that they have to deal with. So.
Right. Well, yeah, I'll put on my industry hat, right? I ran quality assurance at a $4 billion company. And to your point, noise, tons, right? And so what we would look for, and we had procedures in place where we would look for trends. Mm-hmm. So if we had 2 complaints of the same category from the same plant, from the same production date and the same manufacturing line, that would automatically trigger an investigation. Right. And in our process for our decision tree, it was like, okay, is this a food quality issue or food safety? And if it was food safety, it moved to the top of the stack right away. Right. And if that investigation started seeing something, anything, that got to my desk right away.
Yeah. But, turning back to the, iwaspoisoned.com or Yelp or, all of those sorts of social media things or Reddit, I do think that there's potential value in big data. I think there is, but it's sometimes a little hard to, get that completely figured out, and I think that, the folks at iwaspoisoned.com, I'm not affiliated with them, but over the years, I kind of given them suggestions as how they might improve.
Mhm.
And one of the things I, kind of explained to them is, help these people who are making complaints have a better understanding of the science behind their illness. And find out if people are testing positive for a particular bacteria or a virus. And I think, frankly, iwaspoisoned.com is really, really good at picking up norovirus outbreaks
Mhm.
because there's bunches of people. So there's a big chunk of, and I haven't looked, but I bet you they have a bunch of there's a norovirus outbreak linked to raw oysters from the Gulf, not surprising. And so my strong suspicion, if you went to iwaspoisoned.com, that there would be a big bunch of people eating raw oysters with norovirus. So
That's a good point. Yeah, so these things that kind of pop up really quickly,
yeah.
and any type of a social media platform, has this flaw, or I don't know if it's necessarily a flaw, but things go viral, right? It's the Lucky Charms, right? It's like, Lucky Charms made me sick, and everybody goes on, Lucky Charms made me sick too,
Exactly.
and it just grows from there as more people see it.
Yeah, no, and it's not, I mean, I got lots of phone calls about Lucky Charms, but it's not that people, they have diarrhea or you're vomiting today, and you had Lucky Charms yesterday, and you read it on the newspaper that Lucky Charms is causing people to get sick. It's pretty normal. We're sort of designed that way evolutionarily to put two and two together. That's how we're not very good at going, wait a second, is 2 + 2 really 4? We're not good at that. We're much better at just like going, one foot in front of the other, deductive reasoning. And it works most of the time for us, but not all the time.
The caveman who heard the rustling in the bushes that may have been a tiger, who sat there and thought about it for a while, wasn't around for a while.
Exactly.
So let's get some other great questions. Let's see. This is a good one, Laura. Thank you. I was going to bring this up. Can you please comment on the forced arbitration and the babies and children impacted? Ooh,
yeah. So I'm glad somebody brought that up, because I've been doing this kind of work for 30 years. I have arbitrated cases in food cases by agreement. So, arbitration is not like a complete, boogeyman. Arbitration is a quicker, more certain way to get from point A to point B, which is, get the case done. Arbitration is usually like a retired judge. So you have some certainty that the person who you're dealing with and making the decision is not 12 people who couldn't figure out how to get off the jury. But it's really super unusual in a food case to have an arbitration clause. And if anybody wants to read the Daily Harvest terms of service, it absolutely doesn't read like it should have anything to do with food. And if you think about it, I'll give it 350 people who I represent, about 125 of them would not be subject to the arbitration provision because they're children. They got it for free. They went over to somebody's house and ate it. Some people got it for baby gifts. And the spouse, if the spouse bought it and the other spouse ate it, the other spouse isn't subject to the arbitration provision because the other spouse. So you got situations where, you got a husband and a wife or a partners, and one's subject to the arbitration provision, the other one's not, and they live in the same household. So if you think about this whole thing, none of it makes any sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the answer is, well, does it really matter? And the answer is probably not that much. And it's certainly in my case, I filed 2 lawsuits. on behalf of children. They can't do it. They can't put them into arbitration. So I get to do all I want to do with discovery. And that's usually the difference. Discovery, like finding out what happened and why, is truncated in an arbitration format versus a litigation format. I can't do as much discovery in arbitration, and they can't do as much discovery against my client in arbitration. So it's a two-way street.
Well,
And so, but the fact that I can do discovery in the cases I've got, I can use that information in the arbitrations. Now, the other
that was my question. So this may be a little bit far in the weeds, but I got to ask, right? So the information you learn in the people who are not subject to the arbitration, you can use that in the arbitration?
Sure.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And now here it gets even crazier. So I had a number of clients in the Daily Harvest case who were having financial issues. They either didn't have insurance, they have high deductibles, they were off work for a long period of time, and they were struggling financially. We tried to intervene and successfully, in most cases, getting people to not send people to collections and to keep people out of bankruptcy, and that's part of what we do. But some entities are refusing to do that. So I reached out to Daily Harvest, who had made some comments in the press that they were willing to help people. So we said, hey, look, can you help these people with a partial payment? And they wouldn't do it. And they wouldn't do it because they want the other entities involved, the manufacturer and the supplier, to participate as well. So Daily Harvest refused to participate. So I filed an arbitration against Daily Harvest, the manufacturer, and the supplier. Daily Harvest is bound by the arbitration provision, but the other two entities, who are also responsible, are not bound by the arbitration provision, and they said, we don't want to participate. So the whole thing gets even crazier because are we just going to arbitrate against Daily Harvest and then file separate lawsuits against these other entities that have claims against each other? So I can tell, the bottom line is I'm really good at what I do, and I'm going to get all this figured out and make these people responsible for what they did. But the whole arbitration provision is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And it's not efficient nor fair. And so, but justice will be served. I guarantee you.
Good. And yeah, I think that's why you're so successful as a food lawyer in these cases, right? Is you have to be tenacious, right? You got to get to the truth.
Yeah. There's the great speech that Winston Churchill, gave about never giving up, never giving in, and that along with Bruce Lee's "Be Like Water" are two things I think about in litigation. So.
Yeah, I like the other Winston Churchill one. Yeah, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's a good one too. So yeah, another interesting aspect is you're kind of this crazy web that you're describing, right? Is you're also having to deal with international entities, right? So you've mentioned Canada and Peru, and how cooperative are those countries in helping with these type of situations?
Yeah, so we don't know yet whether or not we can get jurisdiction over the company in Peru who produced this product. That's to be determined. Interestingly, Revive has not an arbitration provision, but they have a provision that you have to sue them in Ottawa. And except I filed a lawsuit on behalf of a woman in New York who got it for free, as a baby gift, and so and she had her gallbladder removed, and so I can sue Revive and the supplier of the Terra in federal court in New York, and I'll just use that as a discovery tool. And whether or not I have to eventually hire a lawyer in Canada to work with me to, prosecute a claim there. I've done international work, in South Africa, and I'm working on a case in France, E. coli case in France. So
Oh yeah.
I'm not, I'm not overly concerned about having to do stuff internationally. It's a little bit more costly simply because I have to hire a lawyer to do what I would normally do myself, or at least hire a lawyer to take direction for me to do what I would be normally doing.
Interesting. So as we're kind of thinking about this as well, too, I mean, a thought came to my mind. It'd be really interesting, So as we see, like on food safety chat and things like this, right? There's lots of expertise. It's too bad there's not some way you can't tap into food safety experts out there in different fields and different products and manufacturing to help out on cases like that. That would be really.
Oh, cool. No. I believe me, because it's not cheap. I'm very aware of all my toxicologists and liver specialists and traceback experts, and that I retain on a fairly frequent basis. And maybe some of your listeners have been experts of mine in the past. So the one thing I've learned a long time ago is I'm usually the dumbest person in the room. And so it's but if I can hire people to help educate me, I'm lucky in that regard.
Yeah, well, I was even thinking even broader, Bill, right? So there's these sites that are out there where people with no expertise can self-report information.
Oh, I see.
It's too bad there's not sites out there where people who have problems that they're working on could put that out, and then food safety experts could weigh in.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Because we do this, right? You do it, I do it, everybody on this call, because we care, right? We want to keep people safe. And as I often tell members of my teams, there's easier ways to make money, right? We do this because we care. And the more we can tap into these, the better. It's kind of like, and it's interesting too, from the standpoint, this kind of overlaid, at a larger regulatory standpoint, kind of what FDA has been doing with enhanced traceability, right? Trying to figure out better ways to get back through the supply chain, because as you're kind of wading upstream, trying to figure out where in the heck this stuff came from and who did what, everything that's set up for traceability in the food industry is forward, right? It's like, okay, well, we bought these ingredients, we shipped it to this distributor and yada, yada. And, we do one forward and one back, great. But after that point in time, it gets, lost in this myriad of distributors and jobbers and brokers and warehouses and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's going to be other information coming on that side too. So, wow, fascinating conversation, and time is flying as I promised it would. So guys, if additional questions for Bill, let us know here. This is your time to get those in, but fantastic questions, everybody. And this is why this is so fun to do. Any closing thoughts, Bill, on the case, or other things you'd like to kind of talk about here?
No, I think, I think this case will be interesting as it progresses, because I think it will, hopefully teach, all of us a little bit more about, paying attention to the supply chain and like what we're buying and why we're buying it. And I think there's going to be that aspect to it.
Yeah.
And how that decision was made. I think it's going to be interesting, to see whether or not the various studies on the product and the people, how that plays out, and then, and I think, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's going to underscore the failures of FDA and public health to, get involved and help. So, and I certainly plan to, be as transparent as I possibly can on, all aspects of what I find.
That's the exact word I had in my head too, is transparency, right? We don't get better unless we can learn from these lessons and figure out. And as you had said earlier too, Bill, right, is this it's all going to come out, right?
Yeah. It eventually does. It will. And so it may be 6 months from now or a year from now, but we'll have this conversation sometime in the next 6 months or a year, and we'll have answers to all those questions. Some of there may still be blanks, and those blanks might be, okay, what the heck really was it that was making people sick? That may be a blank, but I kind of think we're going to get there.
Right. Well, and yeah, one of the things that I do with my team members and clients, and that I work with, is when you're putting together information around food safety and you're preparing documentation and things like this, a good acid test to make sure that you're doing what you should be doing is, if this document is handed to you in a court case and Bill is asking you questions, are you confident in what you wrote?
Yes, exactly.
Right. And I tell people that.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to look at it. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, Bill, anything coming up here or things that you like to let people know about or what you're up to? Or,
I mean, it's, we're having some changes at Marler Clark. I've of the 4 partners who originally started Marler Clark back in 1998, the 3 of them will now officially be retired by the end of the year. And so I think, we're going to keep the name Marler Clark, but Dennis Stearns, Andy Weisbecker, and Bruce Clark will all be retired and of counsel. I still get to rely on them every once in a while because they're brilliant. But yeah, so we got a new crop of lawyers, and so we're moving forward. I just turned 65, so people keep asking me what I'm going to do when I retire, and I keep thinking, wait a second, I'm 45. So so I'm going to continue to do this for a while until I either drop or some smarter younger version of me shows up. So,
well, either way, big shoes to fill. So one of the things that I've been working on to let everybody know about, and it's kind of weird because in the comments, they're dropping links, so I can't put the links in here. But if you go to the Food Safety Foundation.locals.com, I put together a free group where we share food safety information and we can talk and chat about different issues. And so as things come up like this, I'll post information on there. It's a great resource. So if you haven't joined already, guys, join that group. It's fantastic. It's growing every week, and I'm really happy with how we're doing that. So go out there and do that. And with that, we're going to close out the chat here for this week. We'll be back here next Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain for me, 10 a.m. Eastern if you're early bird on the Pacific Coast, 7 a.m. for the next chat. And again, we're live on LinkedIn and Twitter, and we're also on YouTube as well. So it's been a fantastic chat. Bill, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for letting me ramble. So
no, this is kind of one of those rare occasions where we get a sneak peek behind the curtain to see what's really going on. So this has been fantastic.
Yeah, sneak peek in the courtroom, as you can see. So.
Yeah, the old the Law and Order theme song is kind of bouncing around in my head. So everybody, enjoy your weekend. Have a great one, and we will see you back here next Friday. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Bill.
Happy holiday.